Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's City Council meeting. We'll get into our agenda here in just a minute. We always have our traditional moment of silent reflection, and this evening I would ask that you keep the family of our city employee Jeff Walmsley in your best thoughts, wishes, and prayers. His daughter-in-law Meredith 2 weeks ago gave birth prematurely to two little guys, twin boys, and Luke, the one little boy, died at Ruby just this past Sunday. Caleb is in critical condition at the neonatal intensive care unit at Ruby Hospital. So let's keep all of the Walmsleys especially in our best thoughts this evening. Thank you very much. And Mr. Steve Wyckoff, would you be so good to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
Sure.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, the first thing, it's always a great kind of a thing when we get to recognize folks, and I'm going to call upon our police chief, Matt Gregory, to introduce the circumstances as to why we're honoring one of our own, Mr. David Rowan, with our VIPs. Matt, you want to speak just briefly to, I guess it was back about September-ish, I'm thinking, right?
Yes. A few months ago, as many are well aware, Mr. David Rowan has been a VIPS member for a number of years now. In fact, he was one of the founding members. Still going very strong with us. This particular act exemplifies police-community relations and positive interactions. On a particular day, just a few months ago, Mr. Rowan called the police department and said that he believed that the other site that he volunteers at the parish house, that there was a fugitive that police had actually been looking for quite some time. This individual had eluded capture for quite a while, and Mr. Rowan believed that he was at that location. Gave us a description, everything we needed to encounter this individual. We promptly proceeded to the scene, encountered the individual. However, he had to lie about his identity to us. Mr. Rowan was continued to be diligent and persistent in his efforts to assist us, and provided us with information that helped to positively identify the individual as the fugitive wanted out of Maryland. Once we were able to take that valuable evidence and effect the arrest, we were able to get a felon from justice off the streets and extradited back to Maryland. And no small part to Mr. Rowan's assistance. And like I said, that exemplifies the kind of positive interactions that we strive for with our community, and Mr. Rowan has certainly expressed that through his actions. As we've progressed over the last several months, I've had a number of conversations with Steve Wyckoff, who is our VIPS coordinator, to establish an awards program for VIPS. We're always looking at ways to enhance the program. And one of the ways that we discussed was to have an established award program recognizing years of service, distinctions in their training, and then finally, what we believe our top award is at this point is the Merit Award, which exemplifies the types of actions that Mr. Rowan took to help police effect an arrest and conduct an investigation. I'll go into a little more. I have, under my report, I have provided the awards chart that Steve and I were able to discuss and come up with. And I know you took it to the VIPS membership over the last few months and got a lot of input from our members. And so I'll expand on that here momentarily. But Mayor, if we could, I would like to call upon Mr. David Rowan to honor him with the first ever meritorious award for our VIPS membership.
Absolutely. Wow. David, please come up. And Steve, why don't you join us too? Chief Gregory. These guys are a lot shorter with their words than what I have, so this will just take us. I know, you wanted some whereases, but you're not going to get that this evening. David, this is a Certificate of Merit. This Certificate of Merit is awarded to David Rowan, dedicated VIPS member serving the citizens of Buckhannon, West Virginia. Thank you for your commitment to the safety of our community. And it's dated today, December 21, 2017. It's been signed by both Chief Gregory and myself. I'd like to congratulate you for your outstanding public service.
Mayor, if I could real quick, one other distinction in addition to the certificates that came from the conversations with the award program, we did establish cloth ribbons indicating each level of award for the VIPS members to wear on their shirts. And this particular ribbon that I have in my hand, indicated by the M in the middle of the ribbon, stands for the meritorious award that you're receiving tonight, and you'll be able to wear this on your uniform from here on.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's try to get it kind of in front of the city seal so we can get that. Yeah.
Center us with that.
Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Looks good to me.
And I don't want to over-personalize or dramatize the evening, but I became aware just a few hours ago of the sudden passing of your mother, just in the last few hours. You're in our best thoughts and prayers too, and I'm sure she's very proud of you.
I kind of like for her to been here.
Yeah, I bet you would. You're in our best thoughts and prayers as well, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you for your excellent work. We are all indebted to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Proud of you, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, Brad and Kim Lincecum couldn't be with us this evening, but we're going to recognize them at a meeting very soon. That takes us down to our department and board reports, and Mr. Jerry Arnold, our Public Works Director, is up first. Jerry?
Well, it's an early Christmas gift. I've got a 3-bullet point report for tonight. Sound system on Main, of course, you don't know if you haven't been on Main Street. And, sound systems in operation.
Mary's trying to drown it out.
Yeah. Maybe we don't encourage singing there. I
won't.
You done?
The theater roof should be completed by the end of the week. The guys took down the projection booth and extended it to the roof. That was done by our crews, and then we have a roofing contractor on site now that's putting the roof on the theater. And this Saturday is the last weekend for the wagon rides. Hopefully we don't get rained out. It sounds like it's going to be pretty dreary. Hopefully it's snow instead of rain. But you know, if you haven't came out and took advantage of the wagon rides, would ask that you do so. Again, it's going to a worthy cause. And just like to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year. Unless you have questions, that's all I have.
That's it?
That's it.
Cool.
That's it. I told you.
Matthew, pay attention.
It's not as though our folks haven't been very busy. Jerry was just in an abbreviated mode.
Yes, they have.
Anybody have any questions? Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate it. Tell all the guys thanks. Okay, that takes us down to our Finance and Administration Director, Amby Jenkins. Amby?
She starts hers off with not much to report either.
There we go. Right off the bat, not much to report. I don't want to take away from Mr. Rowe and congratulate him on that. But we also have here tonight, I saw our parking enforcement officer. Today's her last full day. She's done an outstanding job in the last year here, and she's been a part of the community. She's a volunteer for VIPS as well, and I just bid her farewell and good luck.
Morgan's going to be studying landscape architecture at WVU, and eventually come back to your hometown and make us even better, maybe, right?
Right.
She'll be
Working
back.
back in.
She'll be back.
Best of luck. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so again, I don't have a lot to report. I'm going through the general fund budget right now, each line item to prepare for a budget revision in January. We had a lot of donations, so there's several things I've got to move to different areas, a few things that will go into capital campaigns, a couple of donations that are going to go into the theater capital project. So be prepared for a revision in January, and of course you'll be beginning to work on budgets in January, so I'll give you a heads up on that. Some of you are veterans and already know that. The fire ladder truck was repaired. That bill's in the invoices that you're going to approve tonight, $16,900. And it got that in and back much quicker than they thought, but it has been repaired. Water board, we did what I thought was the final draw on the SCADA monitoring system, and then technically it is the final draw. I had to do a revision of the draw because there's $4,500 still left in the fund, and water board's going to have to determine what they want to do with that $4,500, if it's going to go to payments or another small project. Cemetery board, we finished the financing for the crane truck, and that was delivered. Crane truck helps put pumps in and out of a well and holds quite a bit of weight, so we finished that up. And then I'm preparing information for end of year W-2s, 1099s. Don't really have anything else other than that. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you till next year. Happy New Year.
Questions for Amby? Thanks, Amby.
Thank you. Look at her song.
Tell Barb and Kathy and Teresa and Billy and April and Holly and Shayla that we appreciate their good work. And Morgan, she's still with us. She's going to stick around for the party tomorrow. Christmas City Hall party. Okay, that takes us down to Tom O'Neill. Tom is at a function with his children. They're having a Christmas pageant, and he said he would try to get here before we finished up our meeting, so we'll hopefully see him here shortly. Police Chief Matt Gregory. Matt, are you ready to do double duty?
I'll do my very best.
Okay.
One thing I would like to extend upon is I usually try to take this time each year and recognize the commitment of our VIPS members. VIPS has been in place for 3 years now, and many of the folks that are in the room tonight, in addition to Mr. Rowan, have been here since the inception of the program. And 2017.
I'm sorry, I had an Amber Alert just go off on my phone.
Katie Space Maker.
I see. So she's getting toned down for something. 2017 is not unlike any other year. These folks have given countless hours to the department, to the city. Every function that has pretty much happened throughout the year. Everything from parades to community gatherings to presentations. VIPS has been at. And beyond that, VIPS also rides along with our officers. They help us with administrative tasks. And I've said this a number of times, and I can't overstate it. They are literally a godsend. There's many times that we just couldn't do it on our own without the tireless dedication from these good folks that volunteer with our department with the city.
For the minutes, could you share what the acronym VIPS represents?
Sure. VIPS stands for Volunteers in Police Service. Yeah, Volunteers in Police Service. And what I like to do is to recognize their annual accomplishment is to award them. I like to publicly recognize them and award them with a certificate for the year 2017. And so, Mayor, if I could call them up and present the certificates to those that are here tonight, and then I'll recognize the folks that aren't here, just to make sure that they're recognized. And first, I'd like to call up Mr. Steve Wyckoff. Okay, I got the phone thing, all right? We're getting this down for you.
Yeah, thank you.
There's Mr. David Brilliant. Nice collection of these.
Thank you. Need some frames, more frames.
Yeah, Morgan Clutter. Joel Fisher could not be with us tonight. Jamie Hasbro. I think I've got everybody here tonight. The folks that could not be here tonight that but have given countless hours to the program. Many of these folks were students at Wesleyan College. About a third of our membership is students, round about maybe a quarter. Corey Fox, Morgan Cox, and McKenna Poland. So we'll make sure, Steve, if I could turn these over to you next time you see them, if you can make sure that you extend our appreciation.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
I alluded to this earlier, the award program that Mr. Wyckoff and I came up with for the VIPs. I have included this with your packet. In addition to the Meritorious Award, which we presented Mr. Rowan with tonight, the awards for VIPs also recognize their years of service. These pins will be provided with each member, conducive with their respective years. These specific years of service pins will be worn on the collar, right? And then the other two award pins recognize training in CERT and first aid and CPR, which I believe the vast majority of our members have at least one, if not both of those.
Yes. There's only a couple that don't have the CERT training, but everybody does have the first aid and CPR.
So this is our inaugural award program, and again, this was developed to recognize the accomplishments of our members as well as provide incentive for those who give so freely of their time. A couple other things, and I see one down in the agenda, we'll discuss this. Just bring it up under my report. Just last Friday, Patrolman Sammy Chris graduated the State Police Academy. He underwent 16 weeks of basic police training. Mayor McCauley and Lieutenant Loudon was able to attend that graduation. Mr. Chris is currently working the day shift at this time as we progress through the holidays. Once we get into the new year, he will be placed on the night shift and assigned to Sergeant William Courtney, who will conduct Sammy's field training. We expect field training to last approximately 14 weeks. So he has a structured regimen that he'll go through to take what he learned at the academy and apply it in a real world setting under Sergeant Courtney's instruction. Also in your agenda, we have received notice of Patrolman Barkis's resignation. Patrolman Barkis has accepted a position with another police agency, and his last day will be next week on December 28th. So with that being said, currently the civil service list has 3 names on it. And when we hired Sammy, as you recall, we exhausted the list down to 2 people. We conducted another battery of tests throughout the fall, and was only able to get one other person through those tests to fulfill the list up to 3. That being said, I would recommend, and I know it's up for a possible discussion, but I would recommend the civil service test as we proceed with replacing this vacancy.
Matt, one time it was discussed about regionally gathering names from other communities or nearby us that we could draw candidates from? Because that, we made the moves in that direction.
No, we have not. I know what we've, and what most agencies do is what we've done historically. We'll advertise, and we have, just depending on the circumstances, we've advertised as far away as Morgantown before. Where we've seen our biggest success with advertising, especially on a regional basis, is internet advertising. One, it's much cheaper. When we advertised as far away as Morgantown, we were doing so in newspapers, and that can get very expensive, and then you're limited to how much exposure you get. Internet advertising has really expanded our applicant pool over the years, and that's what we hope to see and continue to do, both from a cost-effective standpoint as well as increasing our applicant pool. So we'll certainly discuss that strategy with the Police Civil Service Commission when they're scheduled to meet here in January. The final item that I have on the report is an update on the CALEA conference. As I mentioned last time, Lieutenant Loudon and I attended the CALEA National Conference in Jacksonville, Florida, last month, and a lot of good stuff at the conference. This was our first conference that we went to, and we saw that right off the bat that there were a number of different tracks that you could specialize in. And with it being our intent to, as we progress toward self-assessment and the accreditation process, it was our intent to tackle this with a team mindset. And so the track that we chose to undergo in training was the accreditation manager track. And each day was had a schedule to basically walk you through the entire process as a manager, everything from getting started all the way through the self-assessment process. Also, there was an introduction as part of this training to the software that you utilize for the adherence to the accreditation standards. And the software is known as Power DMS. So we learned some ins and outs on how to utilize that. As we progress into 2018, of course, right now we're dealing with the vacancy and replacing the vacancy, as well as preparing the budget for the next fiscal year. But as we progress into 2018, we've brought this stuff back with us. And like I said, we learned a great deal. I took a large amount of notes. Was emailing myself every couple of hours from stuff that I was creating in classes, as well as all the different handouts and different examples that I was able to gain from each of the classes. So I have quite an electronic file that I've been going through since we've been back. We have been testing a lot of our systems, and pursuant to the information that we gained on preparing and going through the self-assessment process, we have been getting our ducks in a row and preparing for that process. So as we progress into 2018, we're working toward the enrollment phase and the beginning of self-assessment. One other thing we did learn, and I know we've talked about this before, we learned more intimately the costs associated with CALEA. Of course, right at the outset, as we enroll, the cost of enrollment for an agency our size is $8,475. And once we enroll, we have it's a 3-year process. And I used to think, why does it take 3 years? But after learning what I did, it's a labor-intensive process, and it takes 3 years. We have to adhere to 460 standards, and many of those standards are bullet-pointed, meaning they have different, multiple things that you have to adhere to. And so that's what we've been currently doing, is taking what we learned and testing these things and preparing for the full assessment process. So throughout the 3 years, the only other fee that you're going to have is They recommend that you attend at least one annual conference. The next one being in July of 2018 in Michigan. We've estimated, give or take, the conference costs around $3,000. And that's when you factor in 2 managers going, hotel fees, conference fees, and then travel fees. So this last one was a little more because we had airfare involved. Michigan, we're confident that we could drive to that. And then the one after that is in Kentucky in 2019, so I'm sure we can drive to that as well. So that's just a rounded figure. The other fee is throughout accreditation. Once you finish self-assessment, then they begin a couple of assessments on CALEA's end. And the first of which is what's known as a web assessment. Web assessments occur every year. They have 2 different team members, one being a team leader, one being just a regular member. And for larger agencies, they have several more. I know they mentioned Chicago Police Department is undergoing accreditation now. They actually have 7 managers assigned to them. When web assessments occur, you have to pay the assessors an hourly rate. They are capped at 28 hours a week. Generally, an assessment will last anywhere between 3 to 4 days. And what they're doing is it's an outside eye looking in. They're looking at your standards. They're looking at your compliance with these standards to make sure that you are in fact compliant. We have to pay that, and based on the assessor's fees, I had an estimated figure of around $1,400 that we would have to pay for the web assessment. And again, that's an annual cost. Now, at the end of your self-assessment on the initial, okay, right before we're ready to go to the conference and gain accreditation, one of the last things that occurs is an on-site assessment. And the on-site assessment is similar in scope as far as the web-based assessment, but much more intense because it's at your facility. They spend, again, about 3 or 4 days at your facility. During this, again, you have to pay their hourly rate based on a cap of 28 hours a week, lasting between 3 to 4 days. You also have to pay the assessors airfare, their ground transportation, their lodging, their meals, everything associated with their travel. So we took a rough figure as to what that would cost and estimated that an on-site assessment would cost $2,900. Okay. Now that occurs at the end of your self-assessment during the initial 3 years, and then once you're accredited, so for instance, let's say that we enroll in 2018. Once you enroll, the clock starts ticking. That means accreditation would come due in 2021. If we gain accreditation in 2021, the next thing that occurs is reaccreditation. So as you become accredited, you continue to adhere to these standards. You continue to upload proofs of compliance in Power DMS each year. You continue to have web assessments each year, and then you'll have an on-site assessment every 4 years. Okay? So if we become accredited in 2021, we've paid for the on-site assessment in addition to the web assessments leading up to that. The next on-site would be 2025. Okay? So the average cost of accreditation, once we get beyond that initial self-assessment phase, so we paid that initial $8,400, we went through self-assessment, now we're actually being assessed by CALEA. Your estimated annual cost is $7,870, and that's in addition to, once you become accredited, CALEA charges you $3,470 to maintain your accreditation. So that number is figured into the estimated annual cost of $7,870. Now every 4th year, when we have the on-site assessment, that annual cost would be $10,770, factoring in our estimate for what it would cost for on-site assessments. So certainly as we progress toward enrollment and going through the self-assessment phase, these are numbers to keep in mind that we will have to work into our budgets as we discuss our budget for not only this fiscal year, but we progress over the next several years, the next several fiscal years, to work these numbers in above and beyond the regular operating budget of the police department.
Well, I think that was one of your concerns going into this, the fiscal costs associated with that. And I think, I know I'm in support of, getting this anywhere we can, if it's our discretionary funds or whatever, that it wouldn't impact your budget. And youth, if you feel this is a worthwhile endeavor, or after going down there, did you change your viewpoint on this at all?
No, like I've said before, COLEA is a very professional endeavor to achieve. In fact, the folks that taught the classes were regional program managers. And we had folks that represented everywhere from this part of the world to the Caribbean. There were Mexican agencies there. There were Canadian agencies there. We had West Coast. There were agencies from all over this hemisphere, really. And we were able to. We had the pleasure of hearing from each of the program managers that represented each of those different sections of this part of the world. And they echoed the same sentiment, which really rang true to myself and Lieutenant Loudon. You do this not because you have to. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And I believe that adequately sums up what COLEA is. It's the right thing to do. This is the management practices that are established through COLEA are incredibly sound. They're very professional, okay? And it produces a tremendous amount of accountability across the board for each individual officer and the agency as a whole. So that is a very worthwhile endeavor to achieve. My concern was not that. My concern was the cost. As we bring our needs as a department, just our regular day-to-day operating needs each fiscal year, I didn't want to run into a snag to where we were sacrificing services to pay for something that we should already be doing anyway. And that's professional management of the police department.
Well, Matt, the other question is, there are obviously going to be some increased costs in regard to this. What is the impact in regard to your staffing hours, the commitment that you and Doug and the other officers have to make to achieve these goals and objectives? Have you sort of put looked at that as I mean, that's a cost also that doesn't show up as easy.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a factor that we have to remain cognizant of. Is as we fulfill being compliant with COLEA, it is very labor intensive, and they made no bones about it. In fact, there were different points of view from the various regional program managers at the conference. There were some that were the sole accreditation manager, and which is an incredibly difficult task. But there were others that advocated for the team model, which we've approached. The team model being, right now, primarily myself and Lieutenant Loudon working on the administrative functions, but we were also going to engage our rank and file when it came to specific categories within our standards where individual officers had expertise in. One, to continue the team approach, but two, to give each and every officer ownership into this, which they should have. And I know when I first came to council with the concept of embracing COLEA, I presented a form where every officer signed off on. And that's the ownership that we want everybody to have in this. And again, going back to what they had indicated at the conference, because it's the right thing to do. That's why we want everybody to have ownership in this. But as we take these tasks on with maintaining compliance, it is incredibly labor intensive, whether you do it with a single accreditation manager or if you have a team of a couple of different officers, which Lieutenant Mountain and I have spent the vast majority of our time since we've returned just prior to Thanksgiving working on preparing for enrollment into this. And there were days that we had to juggle where it was just the two of us working. We had a couple of high-risk calls that came in, and we had to drop everything we were doing and go deal with police work. And that can be distracting a lot of times, especially when you're trying to focus on a labor-intensive task such as CALEA. Now, I know in a lot of regard that's just the reality of a small agency. You have to multitask. We've done that for years. But as far as taking on more on our plate, that is something that we need to be cognizant of in terms of finding that appropriate balance between, I mean, take me for example. Over the years, and my predecessors have long been working chiefs. There are times when if I have a guy off sick or if I have a guy that calls off vacation, that I'm the only police officer working. So I have to work as a police officer. I have to go take calls and do investigations. And when you begin to pile more functions such as these compliance issues, it can almost come to the point to where it overwhelms an individual. If you're expecting them to multitask to the point to where they have to balance all these things. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't do these management practices. We should and we do. Part of what we've been testing is our property room. There are a number of standards throughout the CLEA process that are what's known as time-sensitive standards. And there's a number of, I mentioned bullet points earlier, there's a number of bullet points that are associated with an agency's property room. Over the years, we've developed very sound practices for our property room, and we felt pretty confident that we had a pretty good system in place. And what we've been doing is taking CLEA standards and testing it against ours. That has taken a month to do, just to conduct that test. Simply because the initial audit that we established for our room produced a document that was almost 1,600 pages long. And when we're balancing that and handling calls and running the department day to day, it can be beyond labor intensive. So there's just things that we need to be cognizant of as far as how far we want to stretch an individual or how many tasks we want to assign an individual, how many hats we want them to have in terms of being a manager or being able to split their duties between police work and administration.
Do you feel the cost involved and also the staffing hours that are required to go through the accreditation, that at the end of the 4-year period or 3-year period, you'll have a, for lack of a better terminology, a more professional department? Is that?
Oh yeah, there's no mistake that maintaining compliance with CLEA standards gears each and every individual officer toward being a better professional. And that's why I'm such a believer in that concept, because that's what ultimately we want. And I think that was exemplified by the officers signing off on adopting CLEA, is that we all want to be professional. We want to offer the most professional service that we can to the citizens of Buckhannon. And again, not to sound like a broken record, but that's the right thing to do. And I say that because that really resonated with me when I heard them say that over and over again at the conference. So that's the service we should provide.
Is this also
and we strive to provide for our citizens.
Is this also for counties in addition to?
Yeah, absolutely. Any law enforcement agency, actually CLEA accreditation can apply to any law enforcement agency, whether it's a city, county, or state police agencies. there were a number of state police agencies that actually I sat around. In fact, I sat beside the Florida Highway Patrol in many of my classes. It's also for college campuses. It's also for communication centers. It's also for jails. The whole public safety aspect is far-reaching as far as adopting the standards established by CALEA. So the principle behind it is sound, and it's something we should all always strive to do. And again, my concern coming into this, first and foremost, was the cost and it not affecting our regular operations. And then two, to a lesser degree, the time management, as I explained, and finding that right balance to be able to be the accreditation manager while at the same time having not letting our services be interrupted, having enough people to still answer calls and conduct investigations. One thing Lieutenant Loudon and I have discussed in that vein is augmenting the day shift a little more while we continue to focus on the self-assessment processes as accreditation managers in order to keep from spinning our wheels and splitting our time too much, so that we can not set ourselves up for failure with this. Is we need adequate coverage to be able to let us focus on this.
I think if you have the commitment to spend the time, myself and I think all of us will support the cost. So I think we're on even ground here and ready to move forward.
I don't see why we go this far and then just stop.
Yeah.
You know, we got to.
So if
keep
there's
moving
something we
forward.
need to do, and you know, now to allocate this funds to put this at rest or whatever.
In February, when we
The budget process.
start putting the pencil to our budget for 2018-19, that'll be the step up to the plate part of the equation, right? Did you see your colleagues from Parkersburg, Granville, and Charlestown?
We did, and we missed them, and I don't know how we missed them, but we looked for each other, and I think what happened was, since this was our first conference, we only attended the workshops, which was Tuesday through Friday. Saturday morning is when we left. Saturday is the day where the accreditation hearings occur. So if we were at the phase where we were finished with self-assessment and we've had our on-site assessment here in Buckhannon, we would have a hearing at that next conference to determine if we were ready for accreditation. And Granville is farther along in the process, as you folks know. We've discussed that in the past. And they just came on Saturday. So as we were leaving, they were coming in. And so throughout Saturday, they have the hearings, and then that night they have a banquet where they actually award the accreditation plaques.
So this was, did they have their hearing then, Granville?
They actually did not. No, they came there for the initial, but they had to request an extension. They're right at the threshold of their 3 years, and they had to request an extension, which cost them money. Because as I said, the clock starts ticking, and that's why we're not rushing immediately to get into it. We're testing our systems first to prepare for enrollment so that we can adhere to that 3-year timeline. They had to actually request an extension. They got one for a year, so they're not going to have their hearing until later in 2018, I believe in the fall of 2018.
And now, this assessment that you're doing, this is what you learned to do while you were there. And you think that you just can't stop. You've got to keep going.
No, like I said, I believe that this is a very worthwhile endeavor, especially if we can work it in to the police budget and not affect our day-to-day services that we have for the folks here in our community. And especially in the same vein, find that happy medium where we can balance the services with the additional labor-intensive administration that this requires, which I believe we can do. It's just going to take commitment from us, from council, as we progress forward to continue with this. It's definitely a worthwhile endeavor. I think that, especially, and we've said this many times, there's still only one police agency in West Virginia that has clear accreditation. And there's not that many beyond West Virginia. When you look at the national picture, the accredited agencies in the United States or even beyond our borders, like I said, it is an international accreditation. There's a small percentage of those that actually achieve accreditation, and that's really a mark of distinction for the agency as well as the communities that they represent.
Thanks, Matt.
Great.
Did you want to hit any highlights of your monthly report?
No, and not unless there are questions. I just provided the monthly report for November. Unless there's questions.
Thanks, Matt. Questions for Chief Gregory? Tell the guys to be safe.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
for
you.
what you're doing with this.
Okay, Tom O'Neill is now here, so we can.
I apologize for being late.
It's all right. You were listening to kids sing and dance. And
I
all that
was,
stuff.
yep, at kids' Christmas program this evening. So aside from the parking ordinance, which is later on in the agenda, I'm just reporting that we've been working on a number of issues, some with Jerry and ongoing issues with uniforms contracting. A lot of what we've been doing, a lot of what I've been doing in the past few weeks has been advising other department heads on matters that are coming before it. We have a utility tax issue, for instance, that we're trying to work through and trying to get some traction with the tax commissioner's office and get a little guidance on. And so most of the time is spent, if it's not on drafting ordinances for your consideration, it's on advising department heads on various issues. So I'd be happy to take any questions, but the primary issue that I have tonight is under F1. I will say this, as far as the asbestos at the transfer station, I think we have the concept of the ordinance that is understood. We haven't committed it to paper yet. That will be prepared for the next meeting, and it will impose criminal penalties. And as I understood, please correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understood the will of the council, it may include penalties that would include incarceration for the asbestos side of things, given the seriousness of that, even though that opens up.
Yeah, I would prefer for us to go strictly, since those potential penalties attach under state and federal law, in order for us to minimize
cost of prosecution,
the request to have the full-blown jury trial, we can sidestep that if we just have the penalties.
Okay, so you want fine only. You want it to be fines only.
That would be my
asbestos in the
thinking.
transfer
Yeah,
station. Okay.
that would be my thinking.
I was under the impression that it was the other way for this one. I know our habit, our plan has been to eliminate the possibility of incarceration and any penalties on most matters, but I guess I misunderstood the council's opinion on this one.
Anybody else can weigh in, but I'm thinking if it's a bad enough situation and they're looking at state and federal penalties, they could include jail time. Let the state and federal authorities
Take care of that.
do that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I think the additional municipal fines are something we could post at the transfer station.
They're going to be stiff penalties. They're going to, I think, they're going to start at $500 and go up from there.
Yeah, and I hope we never collect a single fine. We want the word to get out that.
Well, actually, and let me rephrase. It would be $500 plus the actual costs of remediation,
Sure.
Which would be calculated
Yeah.
as part of damages and imposed at the discretion of the municipal court judge, of course. But that $500 would be over and above the city's cost of cleanup.
Jerry, do you remember what the breach cost the person last spring? It was a couple $1,000s, wasn't it?
Yes, it was under three.
Under 3,000?
3,000.
Because they had to take the whole load and treat that as though it was all contaminated.
Absolutely. I think, as mentioned, Abby, I think we'd mentioned too, possibility of in a limit if a contractor tries to sidestep the asbestos inspection in Buckhannon, can we maybe hold permits for a year or something for that particular.
Suspend their contractor's license in the corporate limits. That would be a pretty
That'd hurt them in the
good thing as well.
It would, by ordinance, prohibit the issuance of any building permit to that individual or to any contractor that uses that individual as a sub.
Well, and I think if we become aware of it, I think there is some compunction for us to notify the state and federal authorities. I think that's what happened during one of these incidents. Is that correct?
Both of them.
Both of them?
They were both, yes.
It might be good to actually insert that into the ordinance, that we're not doing something arbitrarily and capriciously, but we're mandatory. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I just lost my thought.
I
For 6 months or a year. Yeah, 6 months or a year.
Yeah, maybe issue with the state constitution, it's generally $500 maximum.
Mayor, the application itself, they come
$1,000.
to apply.
Municipal law is different, $500 max.
The contractor himself comes and does a permit request, correct?
Say again, Mary?
Does the contractor come to City Hall to do a permit request to do this work?
They're supposed to get an asbestos inspection before they do that. That's the problem. That we've had a couple of incidents where contractors have sidestepped that process. And in the one instance, the load tested positive.
Right.
After it had been put in with other stuff in one of our trucks at the transfer station, and the whole load is then contaminated. So all that stuff has to be specially treated as opposed to just the little bit that had the asbestos in it.
The trick is when you have a situation like we had out in Tennerton where that old white building was demolished. That was one of the instances that we're dealing with here. That was demolished, taken to the transfer station. There's no city building permit involved in that because it was outside of city limits. So the question is, we'll get together and maybe talk about language on how to avoid problem, because we don't know. There's no city inspection on the front end to know.
The county can also adopt such an ordinance that, like what we have. So maybe a little more communication with our colleagues down the street to do such a thing would be helpful too.
It would.
I don't think so.
It would. But in the
Put that on
meantime,
our list of discussional items.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like we've got something that's a little more complicated than maybe ready for first reading in our first meeting in January. But we'll continue the process on that. That being said, the only other matter I have is F1. I can come back up when that barring questions from members of council.
Yeah, we'll come back to F1 here just shortly. Any other questions for Tom? Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Correspondence and information, I'm going to defer for the moment to our city recorder, who will read the election call, the second of the two by statute required readings of that election call. Dr. Alloy.
Call for election on May 8th, 2018, City of Buckhannon. A general election for the City of Buckhannon is called to be held on the second Tuesday in May 2018 for the purpose of electing the following: 2 council members at large for 4-year terms, recorder at large for 4-year term. The voting locations are as follows: Precinct 8, Buckhannon Academy Elementary School; Precinct 9, Courthouse Annex; Precinct 12, Fred W. Everly Technical Center; Precinct 14, Buckhannon Academy Elementary School. All voters must be registered and must vote in the particular precinct in which they are registered. Persons interested in filing for office may begin on Monday, January 8th, 2018 in the office of the City Recorder at City Hall. The last date for candidates to file for office in person is Friday, January 26, 2018 at 4:30 p.m. By U.S. mail must be postmarked by midnight, Saturday, January 27, 2018. The last date to withdraw from the election is Tuesday, February 13th, 2018. Drawing for position on the ballot will take place on Tuesday, February 20th, 2018 at 9:00 a.m. at the Upshur County Courthouse located in the County Clerk's office at 40 West Main Street, Buckhannon, West Virginia. This is per West Virginia Code 3513A B1.
Any questions about the election call? 2 4-year seats on council and the city recorder. Okay. Also under correspondence and information, you have an interesting piece. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Amby, correct me if I'm wrong, this data was generated by our technology officer, Richard Clements.
That's correct.
And some interesting stuff. This is just for the 6-month period from June through November. Gives you the number of page views. They were talking literally thousands and thousands of views of our website. And when you compare Buckhannon's number of visits to some cities around us, like Washington, PA, Elkins, Clarksburg, Fairmont, I guess is that Greenville, North or South Carolina? Bridgeport, I assume that's Bridgeport, West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia, Morgantown, West Virginia. We had 3,594 hits, June 1 through November 30th. Whereas, that just seems amazingly low to me, that Charleston only had 270 hits?
Yeah.
That just doesn't
Sessions
seem...
may be different than hits.
Yeah,
So that could be 2 minutes or more, or
I don't know.
something like that.
Yeah, that is.
Folks are spending a lot more time on our website than other websites, for whatever reason. So that's
That's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing.
That's because you're reading your memo.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. You're getting an extra candy cane in your stomach.
I couldn't resist it.
I'm gonna give walk home there.
And as Matt Gregory mentioned earlier, we're all very proud of Sammy Chris's completion of the State Police Academy and his program. The commencement program is part of your packet as well. That takes us down to the consent agenda, and there are 4 items under the consent agenda. First would be the approval of the minutes of our last regular meeting on December 7th, approval of the building and wiring permits, the payment of our bills, and the acceptance of the resignation letter of Dan Barkus, who we really hate to lose, but it is what it is. I would entertain a motion that we approve our consent agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Skinner. May I have a second to his motion? I have a second by Mrs. Albaugh. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing of the need for none, I'll call for that question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Takes us down to strategic issues for discussion. We're going to call upon Mr. O'Neill again. There have been 2 or 3 changes, amendments to the previous draft that we looked at on December 7th. Tom, do you want to run us through this draft, and then we'll take it up on first reading?
Sure. This draft does a few things. The revised draft. The ordinance 422 of the City of Buckhannon, amending, modifying, and reenacting ordinance number 409, which is also known as ordinance number 2016-008 of the City of Buckhannon, known, cited, and referred to as the quote-unquote Buckhannon parking ordinance. The genesis of this ordinance is meeting of the Downtown Parking Committee, meetings of the Downtown Parking Committee that have been held to discuss some of the issues surrounding parking issues. Some of the issues that were addressed in that meeting that are sought to be addressed in this ordinance include adequately providing for overnight parking for downtown city residents, reducing the permit fee for lot number 6, which is the lot over by the old Chase Bank property, ensuring that lot number 2, which is the lot immediately across the street from the post office, is only used for 2 hours, treated the way that parking on street is, that is 2 hours at a time. That cars are not permitted to be parked for an indefinite length of time. That is, cars have to be moved on some kind of basis. The committee recommended weekly, and that's what's reflected in the ordinance. That a section of parking lot 3, which is the food court lot, the North Spring Street lot, that a portion of that be made eligible for parking for 24 hours a day, and that that meters be reintroduced there at the rate of 25 cents an hour.
I think it's a kiosk. Utilization of
right.
kiosk.
I'm sorry, I used the meter. I meant the kiosk, not meters. The kiosk, to permit parking during that 3 to 6 a.m. period, basically for residents or people that are at least just spending the night in the downtown area where they can't otherwise park between 3 and 6 a.m. The ordinance does a few other things. It clarifies that notices may be served by first-class mail and not registered mail. That was a growing cost of doing business for violations, and it frankly made, I think, many violations not cost-effective to enforce when the certified mail fee was greater than the fine that you're trying to collect. In other, there's an article provision here that all handicapped accessible parking spaces must be signed as, or marked clearly with a sign on a signpost as handicap spaces. That's Article 5. Again, as discussed earlier, it clarifies that no violations of the parking ordinance can include incarceration, that violations are fine only. And the reason for that, of course, and for just anyone paying attention, when it comes to a state law or a municipal ordinance, if there is a possibility of jail time attaches to a violation, even if there's no intent on the city to seek that penalty, the violator is entitled to a trial by jury. So we take it off the books. We take the possibility of incarceration off the books. We limit trials to bench trials, which significantly reduces costs for enforcement. And finally, it clarifies, and this is for your consideration, it clarifies that within the C1 downtown commercial district, parking of any particular vehicle is limited to 2 hours within any 24-hour period, which I think was always the spirit of the law. But it has been abused over the years, in which you'd have an individual who'd roll up to the next space and try to claim a new 2-hour period begins.
Pause button for just a second. We know there's been some backlash about this amendment to the previous policy. First, let me say, if there is anybody in the state of West Virginia that wants to come forth and say they have a more liberal parking policy that is pro-user, pro-visitor, pro-resident, pro-business than what our policy is, I'd like to know about it. Because there's been all this stuff on social media about stop the insanity and this kind of junk. This is an outstanding policy that and when we adopted it late last year in 2016 and implemented it in January, Morgan is here. She began to observe that there were some little glitches here and there in the actual verbiage of the ordinance. So Amby and Jerry and Bryson and CJ and myself, and I think Jim Farrell and Lance Corey were on that parking committee too. We said, okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's let this go for a few months and continue to observe issues, tinkerings that need to be affected with the policy. And then we'll revisit the ordinance after the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. So the culmination of trying to fix some of those little glitches, we've had 2-hour free parking on Main Street for 25, 30 years in Buckhannon. Yeah, this isn't anything new.
It's been that way as long as I've lived in Buckhannon for 25 years.
So what we've done is we've taken all of the parking meters out all over town and have expanded free parking on all of the streets downtown. That's good for people that drive cars and park cars. We established a policy where you no longer pay to park in any of the parking lots for 21 of the 24 hours of any day. That's unheard of. Even Lewisburg charges to park in the lots, and that's where we stole some of this stuff down there from our buddy John Manchester in Lewisburg. So we're even more user-friendly. So stop the insanity, I agree. Let's quit talking about something that you don't understand. Because
I guess it depends on what the insanity is. The insanity is not to be found in the ordinance. I think it's
But look,
Mr. Mayor, and I don't mean to interrupt. I would say I have traveled up and down this state for 25 years that I've been living in West Virginia. I've lived in a number of different municipalities. I've spent a lot of time in a lot of cities, and I am not aware of one that has a more generous downtown parking policy than Buckhannon has now or will have under this ordinance.
This process has taken years. We raised $4,000 or $5,000 to have the plan done, and the two primary goals of this comprehensive plan was to maximize usability of available parking stalls. We've learned that the perfect match is 80% usage. So if you're in one block in downtown, it means there's about 3 spots open. That's optimal. The second was to minimize parking fines. Now this parking study was presented to Consolidated Public Works, and I believe it passed unanimously. It was presented to council and passed unanimously. This last edit, in our brainstorming meetings, we were saying, what tools do we have to modify the behavior of the chronic violator? The person that rolls their car once it's marked or goes around the corner. And that's where this cumulative 2 hours and 24-hour period. But I don't disagree with some of the chatter about that being a little too restrictive. So if it was, and when you're creating an ordinance or a law, you have the expectation of it being enforced. And as technology advances, 20 years from now, maybe you can enforce anything and everything remotely. So we want to be careful and cognizant that we're not creating something that could, if enforced, would be an onerous responsibility or something on the citizen. So to say cumulatively within a 24-hour period for any discrete vehicle, particular individual vehicle, if enforced, would be a problem, I think.
I agree.
But we had no other way to try to, I guess we could. One, is it a real issue? Morgan, identified that there were individuals that were rolling around, and we didn't really have something that how we could manage that. But maybe there's a different strategy. But my issue is with Article 1, Section 3, and Article 2, Section 1. No parking is permitted for any discrete vehicle for more than 2 hours in any 24-hour period. I don't know. Yeah. What are the rest of your thoughts?
So, well, I agree. I think when you consider our downtown, Mayor, I agree with you that we have a great parking plan, and I think that's reflective in the fact that we have a main street that's full of stores and full of businesses and is very attractive. I think if you start looking just in our area alone, Clarksburg has a disastrous parking plan. They have nothing downtown. Fairmont is worse than Clarksburg, and there's even less in Fairmont than there is in Clarksburg. You start looking around at some of these towns that, you know, I've been in Fairmont before, and you're running to your vehicle because you know you had a meeting that went long, and the parking enforcement person sees you going and hurries up and writes that ticket before you, and then and tries to race you to the vehicle. I mean, but when you have a city that needs revenue, I mean, that's if that's your last resort, that's what some do. With this particular plan, you know, I too really struggle with the 24-hour period because, one, I'm not sure how we're going to, I wonder about the enforcement of it. And so perhaps I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, but I think perhaps a lot of the quote-unquote offenders are business owners that try to park close to their store if the weather's not good or what have you. I'm not saying that those are the only offenders, but I know a couple downtown that, you know, it's a small town, you know people's vehicles, and you can see them repeatedly over and over. I talked to you about, you know, a couple. But perhaps maybe an answer is to have a conversation with the people that work downtown. I know it's time consuming, but to have a conversation with them and just talk about the fact that, you know, this is the goal here. We want people to have the most access to parking on Main Street because that drives business into the stores. If people they're not just going to come back later. Some do, some don't. Some just, if they don't find a parking spot, they're just going to keep going and go somewhere else, and that's potential lost revenue. So, I mean, I'm not crazy. I know, I'm coming.
I've been trying to ask a question for a while.
Well, okay, but I mean,
Before you started.
So, the 25 cent per hour on Lot 3 on North Spring Street seems kind of, if everywhere else, if we're not looking to add, we've spent a lot of time trying to reduce fees on parking lots off of Main Street. It seems like we're going a little bit backwards and adding 25 cents on one lot downtown only. But I'll yield to her so that, I mean,
you can go ahead and answer this question.
Well, I would just answer the question by saying that the purpose of that is to provide for individuals who are staying overnight in the downtown area, but they may not want to buy a permit, an overnight permit. And the lots have to be cleared from 3 to 6 a.m. That would enable people to have somewhere to park between 3 and 6 a.m. And the 25 cents an hour is a way of ensuring that it's being adequately used for its intended purpose and not being abused. People are just going to sit there and park vehicles for long periods of time in that
okay,
section.
so I guess why wouldn't someone want to buy a permit?
So if they're just visiting somebody who lives there.
But could we have a temporary permit that someone could buy?
Well, look, if they're visiting the first time, you get two warnings anyhow. So if it's enforced, I think the only reason that's demarcated that way is because this council made the investment of $15,000 to $18,000 for this kiosk. I don't think we want to go tearing it out. I mean, it could be altered, that going down the road. So there's 18 spots that are closest to the Main Street that you pay for. Everything else is free. So I agree.
And then the other issue being that if someone is visiting, and the permits are issued out of City Hall when they arrive.
They might not be.
When is a permit going to be available?
I've heard a lot of people say they won't use this lot. They don't understand the kiosk. It doesn't. I mean, we're not used to that. I mean, that's a large city thing. I mean, you go to Charleston, you go to Pittsburgh. There's kiosks everywhere, but in cities of 5,000 people, they're not really prevalent. And I mean,
but that applies to the overnight.
But what I'm saying is people, the perception is that thing is live all the time, and they won't use that parking lot. People come to our office all the time and say, well, I got to run an errand downtown, but I won't use that parking lot because it's you know, they think that
Well,
it's
the
live
whole
all the
parking
time.
lot, we need, once the signage goes up, then,
Yeah, that's
then
better.
we're going to also relabel the kiosk itself, so it has procedural guidelines.
Number of the spaces
And
and
so there's
say,
18 spots, and we have another 80 spots, I believe, that are free, and once those signs go up in there, then they'll know that that's a free lot, you know, along with the rest.
I would jump in and say that in a couple of years, if the kiosk is not sufficient for us working, you know, let's not just say, hey, we spent X amount of dollars and we can't get rid of it. It's a sunk cost that's overdone with. And sometimes we'll learn a lesson. So I wouldn't get rid of it now, but
Right.
let's make the assessment in a couple of years and maybe it's not worth keeping.
Back, go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
Tom, I have a few questions. The first is the two different places where it talks about the 2 hours within 24-hour period. There'll be signage so that people will understand, right? So that they. So back to Robbie's point.
I mean, that'd be up to Consolidated
Okay.
to put.
So back to Robbie's point, the purpose of this, the purpose of the 2-hour limit is to make sure that there are some spaces available for people who want to come shop downtown, right? Because I agree, I've had the same issue with not being able to get out in 2 hours, but it's not for shopping. It's usually if there's a meeting or eating out somewhere. But if you want to eat out and shop, 2 hours might not be sufficient time.
Right.
We received a really nice letter from Mr. Madigan. And he points out that there might be some challenges for people who need handicapped accessibility, and that it might take them longer to do their errands downtown, and you know, especially if you add a lunch in. So I'm wondering if the same restriction will apply to the handicapped accessible.
There's nothing in
spots.
the ordinance that exempts handicap spots from the general provisions of the ordinance.
And are they
That's not to say that that can't be amended into the ordinance.
Right.
You can certainly amend it tonight on first reading. But there are handicapped accessible spaces in the lots.
Right, but if you're handicapped, that might be, depending upon what your handicap is, it might be a bit
Distance
of
can mean a lot.
Right, right. So I think we do need to consider that there might need to be some exception for that. And other than that, again, I usually think if you're more than 2 hours, it's because you're also having a meeting or a meal, and you can
And I guess I
interrupt
could
and
go
go
back
move your car.
if someone's attending a meeting downtown, then they want to consider parking in one of the
Correct.
lots instead of parking on
Correct,
Main
I
Street.
agree. If you know in advance that you're.
We're definitely trying to re-engineer people's conduct. There's no question about it.
Right.
Well, I think that this is a good, okay, let's be positive, okay? I think this is a good problem to have. We have a downtown that people want to come to, and we have more people, you know, theoretically, than we have spaces that are front door access. I mean, that is a great problem to have. No, few cities have that. But what Susan's saying is what I was thinking of. You know, we have a courthouse that you could be at longer than 2 hours. We have law offices that you could have a longer than 2 hour meeting, dentist office, doctor's office, you name it.
You can park in the lot and walk.
Correct.
I think one of the challenges is that a lot of those spots are being taken up with people who are dining, and then you can't get in if you want to shop. And I think that will get worse when the
Which
daily
spots,
grind
though?
opens. The ones on Main Street, I think, are taking up a lot of
The
time.
street side parking, not
Correct.
lots. Right?
There are several beauty shops downtown. That takes a long time. My mother pointed
Not
that
2
out.
hours.
So, well,
Have to have a lot of beauty.
And understand,
There's no shortage
But again, you
in the
could plan
lots,
ahead and park in a lot.
Yeah.
remember what we said a little bit ago. You get 2 warnings. You know, I mean, if you get a little thing on your windshield that says, hey, don't do this again. If you're going to park longer than 2 hours, park in one of the lots.
Last time I got a ticket, that's okay.
When did you get a ticket? We just put this policy into place last
I
January.
got a warrant today, actually.
Yeah.
Did the committee, I want to thank the parking committee for doing this.
Yeah, they did a great job.
Did they discuss the 3 hour versus 2 hours?
Yeah, someone, or at least for handicapped, I would.
I mean, the question, the only thing is in getting into, I mean, the same principle applies for drivers with handicap placards. That is, you know, we need to ensure that they have
True,
sufficient,
people coming in have access.
and there's sufficient turnover availability for them as well. So I mean, it's, you know, to say either handicap spots will be exempt or on a different time scale or whatnot, I mean, it almost gets away from the purpose of the ordinance.
Do we have
for handicap folks.
do we have an adequate number of handicapped
I think they
spots?
studied that,
We
didn't
do?
They're on every block.
Okay.
Dave, I think
I think you're right.
if you took it to 3 hours, you're going to have shop owners that will show up at work at 9 o'clock, leave their car parked in a spot, go home for lunch at noon, come back at 1, and park for another 3 hours till 4 o'clock. And it's.
You think the owners are doing that, or employees?
Oh, we know they are.
Yeah,
I agree with Robbie. That's a conversation.
we need
Parking enforcement officers right
It's
there.
in their, but it's in their best interest
we need
to
to
have
sit
those
down,
spots
that's
free for
exactly right,
customers.
and they're defeating their own
I could
purpose
see
of
an
being
employee
a
running late to
Well,
work.
that's why I think, I mean, the way you get things done, I think is most effective. Efficient and effective aren't always the same two things. So I think actually going and having conversations with shop owners, and there are businesses that just have literally one person in them, but there are businesses that have several employees downtown. I don't like the 24. I think a lot of us don't like the 24, or a little bothered by the 24-hour period. So I'm just wondering if we should try that approach first in having conversations with store owners before enacting this, because I think, I don't know, from a public relations standpoint, I think we could be hurting ourselves a little bit, because what we don't want to create is, they're trying to make it difficult to go downtown. We don't want that, and I think just because a few people are maybe abusing this, I think we could curb it by having some conversations. Then if that doesn't work,
Look, when we started talking about this in November of 2015. This is the end of December of 2017. You had a committee and you paid them $5,000 through a state grant to do this policy, and we tabled it to.
But this 24-hour cumulative was in fact really just added in this last modification.
Yeah,
that's right.
Because out brainstorming away at how to modify the behavior of chronic violators.
Yep.
Right. And I don't.
The roll-up.
So when my conversations with the mayor of Lewisburg, which I guess they kept their parking ordinances on the books, but they choose to unenforce them, so all their parking is free, to my understanding. They said that when they have an issue with someone, and it's coming up, they keep kind of a little tab, Sally's parking in front of the shop again, and then they get enough, and then they send a uniform officer to go have a conversation with them, saying, this has happened, and we're all in it together. These are our policies, you've been not adhering to them, and he said that 98% of the time that works. Now, I don't know whether we want to put something in here for every 100% of the people for 2% that cause problems, and the rest of us, and then we're sending a message to everyone else that if you go down for lunch, you can't go down for dinner, or if you get your hair done, that's it, you can't go to the bank in the same day.
That doesn't make sense.
But it isn't the reality, but because it won't get enforced that way, but.
How would you change it to, well, you could.
Or just strike the cumulative 24 hours.
Or change it from cumulative 24 hours to cumulative 4 hours. And say that you can't park more than 2 hours in a 4-hour period.
That'd be tough to police.
Well, I was under the impression in one of these communities that there was a device available to help.
$7,500.
Yeah, there are.
Not that much.
It's crazy. Morgan, do you want to say anything about that? We can't fire you.
Right. That's true. Well, I do think that it is, I have seen a lot of business owners that are doing it in front of their own businesses, and I've spoke with some, and they think that they deserve, because they have a business, they deserve to be able to park in front of their business for as long as they feel like. And, however, I don't agree with the cumulative for 2 hours, 24 hours, because it's going to be almost impossible to enforce that I can think of. Mm-hmm. And there's just only a few, there's a handful of people, I know them on top of my head, but
You're on camera, you want
Name and shame.
So when you said a lot, you really just meant a handful. Because in the beginning you said there were a lot of businesses.
Well, there's a lot of infractions.
well, a lot of the people who are doing it are business owners. That's not what I meant. But not, there's a lot, not
So
most
is there a
business
lot,
owners.
are there a lot of people violate parking?
They're doing that. I could probably think of 5 or 6 that do it on a regular basis. And what I was under the impression of, it's 2 hours per street downtown. Because the signs say 2 hours on street. I don't know if you guys have seen them. And maybe you can park on that street for 2 hours and move to another street for 2 hours. That was my impression. Because we use the chalk to mark the tires, and you have to go approximately 6 tire rolls for the chalk to come up. You can't just move up 1 space. You actually have to go somewhere.
Trade secrets here.
Yeah.
Although I've seen people over the years.
Yeah, they have done that, and you can still see the chalk on there, usually.
He just said he did that.
Years ago.
Well, it's kind of sad, isn't it? This is really sad.
It's free
Well, what
parking.
we usually do is if the chalk is still visible, we give them a ticket. That's how we enforce it right now. So if they roll up the space and the chalk's still there, we give them a ticket because they've been there 2 hours.
But they've already had 2 warnings in a line.
Right, if they've had 2 warnings. And what you said about speaking with business owners, if they're getting a ticket, that's because we sent them a letter telling them how to correct their behavior. So they already know what they're doing wrong and how to fix themselves. So I don't think
They still do it.
yeah, and they still do it.
Well, maybe it's mostly
Well,
scheduled business.
I mean, okay, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but a lot, I mean, I get a letter, it's not nearly as effective as someone comes to sit down and have a conversation. I'm willing to do it. I mean, I just think this is a small community. This is, for all intents and purposes, a family, and I think we need to, we need to be more face to face and more personal about it. I think that could be better than just here's a letter.
Yeah.
But I know it's documentation. I get that.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Can I say something? No, you finished, please. Sorry.
I actually spoke with a business owner yesterday who is a chronic offender, and it doesn't go over well. They apparently, as of today, he's corrected his behavior, which may say more about what you're saying, but the conversation it just aggravated him. It made him more upset.
Sure.
I mean, if somebody's abusing you verbally or any other way, when you're out there walking around trying to do your job, I would call Matt and say, hey Matt, could you come have a conversation with this individual? And
Call Robbie and me and we'll go see them.
yeah, Dave.
Tim, I'll go see them.
When I was on the planning commission, we were working on parking issues, and I did visit many businesses downtown and spoke with them, and all of them wanted people moving in 2 hours, all of them. And what I ran into was employees who were shifting the system. They would, instead of parking where we're going to have meters for they're going to park for longer, they wanted to go out and move their car every 2 hours, and the business owners weren't happy about that either. So I don't see any problem. If you're going to change behavior, it's going to take a little bit of time. People are going to complain at first, but going from a typewriter to a laptop, people complained forever and ever. Now you can't even imagine anything like that. And the kiosk is not a big deal to learn. And using a meter planning, if you're going to park downtown for more than 2 hours, choosing the appropriate lot is not an issue.
Pays a ticket. That's the price.
Or pay your
For me, that's the
ticket.
price of not finding
Pay
it.
your ticket.
Let me mention a possible compromise. What if we did the 2-hour collective thing relative to Main Street only?
I like that.
Well, the reason we made the uniform on North Canal and Spring is why should there be a difference?
Yeah.
Why should the businesses on North Spring or Canal have meters and Main Street has free?
You're still going to have 2-hour parking on the other streets. It's just that it doesn't, the collective rule won't kick in. It would just be on Main Street. 2 hours on Main Street during any 24-hour period. I don't know. It's
respond to this.
it's.
I'm as anxious to put
talking
this
about
in the
it.
books as anyone. This has been years and years and years, and
you're on the committee.
Yeah,
you were part of the brainstorm that came up with this language.
Well, I've never done anything right the first time yet. So.
And let me state, there is no pride of authorship here. It's your ordinance. I just write it. So you
Well,
in it, changing it, whatever.
what
you
about
want.
this man that wrote this letter
Yeah,
to each of
we need
us?
to get back
I mean,
to
we need to answer him.
I want to thank
Very
him
nice
for
letter.
writing a thoughtful letter.
Yeah, he did. He thought it out. He didn't,
It's being interpreted as if you come, you come downtown the clock ticks, and once you get 2 hours, you can't bring your car back downtown to some, if you take a literal interpretation of the way this is written.
That should be changed.
So what do you want to do, Mayor?
I want to move this ordinance along in some form.
May I recommend this? That if you advance it to second reading, it can be amended at your next meeting, and then advance to a third reading.
So we should think about it.
I mean, at least to get the.
Why don't we just take out the cumulatively within a 24-hour period tonight?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion on the motion. Call for the question. All those in favor of approving this ordinance on first reading with the deletion of cumulatively within a 24-hour period, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay.
All right. Well, now we have
But don't forget about,
Now you have to do the ordinance on first reading.
Mayor, you're right, so good.
That was amending the ordinance.
Okay.
Now you've got to.
Well, I said motion.
You did say approve the ordinance.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear.
I think we amended it. and
We
approved
amended it and approved it at the same time, right?
Yes, you did. Okay. F2, Tom, we're not ready for that yet, but you're
No, we're
working.
that.
F3 is the approval of the City of Buckhannon to continue our membership into 2018 with the Buckhannon Upshur Chamber of Commerce. I sure hope we would do that. May I have a motion to that effect?
No move.
I have a motion by Mr. Thomas and a second by Mrs. Albaugh. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing of the need for none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of approving our 2018 continued membership in the Buckhannon Upshur Chamber of Commerce, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign, motion carries. Mr. Van Nostren is still working on the First Energy Foundation grant application for the Colonial Theater. So we're going to hold off on that one until the next meeting. F5, authorization to sign the agreement with Raven Rock Networks, the technology support services company that came in as the singular and thus the low bidder. Amby's been keeping us posted on this through the utility boards and everything else. This is an excellent opportunity for us. I understand that the principals with Raven Rock are previous folks that were associated with MPL, so they already know our system. I would entertain a motion that I be authorized to sign the agreement with Raven Rock Networks.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Rylands. May I have a second to his motion? I have a second by Mr. Thomas. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I know I was supposed to, since there's not much discussion, this is just second time. I'm going to abstain once again just because of the conflict of interest.
Mr. O'Neill was giving me instructions on.
Right, but I mean, we're doing it right now, so I need to leave the room and come back for like a second.
Is that right? So before we vote, he has. No,
He has to get
before
up and leave the
discussion
room?
even when-
I'm not the ethics commission. I
Okay.
just can tell you what they said.
Okay, tell us what they said again.
Said if an individual has to, is unable due to a conflict of interest from voting on an issue, that they should not be present in the room while the body is discussing the matter or voting on it.
Too late. Skinner's going to jail.
I'll come visit you, Bubba.
Yeah.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? I'm going to call for the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Skinner has abstained from participation, but it's otherwise unanimously endorsed. Okay, F6. This is a reminder only, but we do have a couple of, in January, the Animal Care and Control Commission is scheduled to meet. I have a couple of nominations for that, but if you have other folks you want me to consider, let me know between now and January 4th. Fire Civil Service Commission, we have the city appointment to the Fire Civil Service Commission is vacant. And the firefighters have their appointee already in place, as does the chamber. This would be the city's appointment. So if you have someone in mind, pick up the phone or email me or bang on the door, let me know. I haven't given it a whole lot of thought myself. I think I got Animal Care and Control Commission covered. I'll have a couple of nominations, but if you have somebody else, let me know. We need a fire civil service commissioner, and we also have 2 current vacancies on our planning commission. Okay? All right. F7. In light of Dan Barkis's resignation, I would like us to instruct the Police Civil Service Commission to review their list of eligibles, including the probable new testing, to come up with a full body of folks. We may only have 1 person on that list of eligibles because 2 of the other 3 have indicated that preliminarily, that they don't want to come to be a police officer in Buckhannon. So we need to start the testing process again. And you heard Matt Gregory's recommendation to do that earlier as well. I would entertain a motion that we instruct the Police Civil Service Commission to retest and establish a new list of eligibles.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Albaugh and a second by Mr. Skinner. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing of the need for none, I'll call for that question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Now we're down to comments and announcements. Mrs. Albaugh.
Nothing.
Nothing. She's not even a lousy Merry Christmas. I mean,
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Shop downtown. I did.
Yeah, just don't park downtown, right? That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke.
I'll walk them.
Mrs. Caperi is not with us this evening. She's not feeling a little under the weather. Mr. Rylands?
I'd like to wish everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and the hard work that's been ongoing on this parking plan and all the drama ensued from the last newspaper article. And but this is the process of working together collaboratively to find solutions that are in the best interest of the community. So it's not been easy, but I think it's good work. It's a thoughtful, collaborative plan that is welcoming. So if our intention is to be a welcoming community, then we have to behave like it. And this takes a step in that direction. And I think the amendments we've made tonight are aligned with that. So good work, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Skinner.
Thank you, Mayor. I too wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I would like to congratulate Mr. Rowan back there once again this evening, and thank Matt and Doug for traveling down to Florida and learning on our behalf. We're very fortunate in this community to be a safe community, and we have a department that helps us stay that way, and I'm looking forward to us earning that accreditation. So, and I'm glad we made the amendments we did. I would like to stress, make sure that this is not it. We have a couple more to go, and we welcome the input of the people that live in this community that utilize our downtown. So, with that, that's all I've got.
Mr. J. David Thomas.
I wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and a safe holiday season. And also, I'm going to thank David Rowan for what he did last September. I appreciate that. And I wish Morgan success at WVU and her landscaping endeavors. And wish you all well. All be safe.
Thanks, Dave. Dr. Susan Howard.
Happy holidays. Ho, ho, ho.
Thank you, Susan.
I have my short Christmas statement. This is
short in quotations.
My dear Santa letter.
Is there only one page?
Yes.
But it's like in
just really little font.
It's in 6-point font, single space.
How big is the page, Dave?
Dear Santa.
Legal page.
First, I'm pleased to continue Buckhannon's sister city relationship with the North Pole. I look forward to our delegation of talented sunny Buckers soon heading north to your frozen tundra to install some really nifty benches and murals there, in exchange for you sending an elfin committee to our place to scope out the possibility of establishing a satellite workshop and distribution center for your worldwide operations here. I have some sites in mind for a toy plant or perhaps a candy cane and stocking factory. Your elves would soon discover several nifty cafes here to satisfy their hot chocolate, eggnog, and cookie yearnings. And for those who may be more Java-oriented, we invite them to try both Mountain Roaster and Stone Tower Brews coffees. Buckhannon is actually the coffee capital of West Virginia now. Our donut shop also makes the very best pepperoni rolls anywhere, and they've got the hardware to prove it. Perhaps in 2018, the elves could even enjoy some hot, hard cider during a Sunday brunch. You can park your sleigh for free anywhere downtown on street for 2 hours and 21 hours in our mini lots. Don't believe the headline that we're cracking down on parkers. That's balderdash. Don't believe what you read on social media either. Stop the insanity. New places like The Social, amazing grilled cheese sandwiches, and soon a new Starbucks will prove popular with your elves and our natives alike. Fishhawk Acres has new seating. Miss Piggy's makes swell barbecue. Don Paco's is the bomb. Three Quarter Cafe is doing brunch. Audrey's is super home-style cuisine, too. Get your ice cream at Sweet Delicious. Let's get you a seat on our development authority. Second, we've been a very good community this year. I know you hear that from all the towns that write you, but those other places really don't have all that we have. We still have the coolest downtown in all of West Virginia. Our architecture is fabulous, the music in Jawbone Park and on our river is terrific, and the many special events we have throughout the year are like none other in all of West by God. In April, Hillbilly Days. In May, it's our Strawberry Festival, Festival Fridays, Fall Fest, and about a dozen parades a year. Our history from Buckhannon and the Pringle Brothers to Steve Kuntz, Ted Cassidy, check out Lurch, Gray Barker, Gene Lee Latham, Jimmy Pankow, Per Lawrence, and a bunch of other colorful, talented folks from our past just makes us a must-visit venue. Third, as for our actual Santa wish list, we'd love to complete Trader's Alley from Main Street into Jawbone Park. More improvements to our parks, including the rededication of our North Buckhannon Park with new playground equipment, the public safety complex, and Stockert Youth Center would be really nice too, and especially a new auditorium gymnasium at SYC for our kids. Any help you could render to help us realize the restoration of our Colonial Theater on Main Street would be much appreciated as well. That place is largely about our kids too. Perhaps you could free up some elves during your post-December 25 downtime. It's slightly warmer in sunny Buck than the North Pole most of the time. Any help with the Charlie Harper mural in 2018 also would be grand. The Sunny Buck Express, a clever tram to help transport residents and guests alike between venues and around our town, would be super cool. We're also eyeing up a splash pad and a zip line downtown. Do any of your elves do sidewalks? The guys in our Streets and Parks Department could always use some help as we plan on building miles of new sidewalks here during 2018. Finally, if you could muster some good luck for our community's efforts as new ventures along or near Main Street are commenced with the Innovation Center, the Opera House, St. Joseph's Hospital, and Harbor Freight, as we all work together to transform our entire downtown, well, that would be extra appreciated. We're pretty stoked about the proposed river trail expansion, our handicapped fishing pier, more improvements to the new dog park, a new river trail pavilion, and the Gateway West project too. In closing, remember Santa, we're all in this together. Merry Christmas to everyone, and may we all enjoy a very happy, healthy, prosperous, and most importantly, fun-filled New Year in 2018. Please resolve to be kind and to love one another. Check in on your neighbors. Please support the Parish House and Salvation Army this holiday season. Drop off some canned goods or a jar of peanut butter or a coat you're not wearing anymore. See you all back on January 4. God bless us, everyone. I would entertain a motion that we adjourn subject to a very short executive session. There'll be no decisions made in executive session.